We hear a lot of perspectives on the Mankind podcast. Inclusion of a guest is not an endorsement of their views, and the opinions expressed here do not always represent the mission or values of the Mankind Project USA.
Looks like the rain has gone.
Today on the Mankind podcast, we get back together with Daniel Ellenberg, PhD. Daniel is the past president of the American Psychological Association's Division for the Psychological Study of Men and Masculinities, Division 51. We've had him on the show before, and Daniel's become someone that I rely on. In this conversation, we're talking about Angels and Traitors, and a whole lot more. The Angels and Traitors are archetypal frames or parts frames to understand as coping mechanisms for dealing with hard circumstances. And to get there, we talk about archetypes, we talk about personas and actors, we talk about threat and reward systems, we talk about a lot that we deal with as human animals. This episode is for you if you're out here trying to change the world, and I bet you are, and you're looking for more tools for adaptability and resilience in a difficult time in a difficult world. This episode is for you if you're striving to understand the system that is you in the world and trying to have some fun in the paradox of becoming. We're going to give you some keys to processing difficult situations by harnessing these angel parts of you that want to thrive and working with those traitor parts of you that are just trying to survive. Daniel and I recorded this before the recent series of mass shootings in the U.S., and I hope this discussion will help you, as it has helped me, be in the deep sadness, in the fear, in the despair that's present, and to recognize the care for the reality of the world. It's helped me find an angel voice within that's supporting me to act with more love and more determination in the face of what seems like unspeakable horror. Thanks for being here. Hey everybody, it's Boysen Hodgson. Welcome back to the Mankind podcast, the podcast where we are setting out to prove that there is more than one way to be a man. And I think we're doing a pretty damn good job proving that. Today, I get to hang out with a friend of mine, Daniel Ellenberg. Daniel has a long list of accomplishments, and I'm just going to give you a couple of them. He is the founder of Strength with Heart men's groups. He's the co-founder of Relationships That Work. He's a principal in Rewired Leadership. He's also a licensed therapist with 4 decades of experience. He is the past president of the American Psychological Association's Division for the Study of Men and Masculinities and co-author of Lovers for Life. And he's also a guy that I go to have conversations where I always get something new out of his decades of experience working with people in private practice and his decades of experience interacting with topics around men and masculinities. Say hey, Daniel.
Hey, I'm just listening to what you asked me to do. I'm very
You're very compliant. That's not been my experience of you in the past.
I don't always tell the truth either, but
So I'm happy to be with you. Last time we spoke, you and I were just going off and doing what we do, talking about news of the world and what we're all facing and the changing times and culture wars and all of these things that you and I get into. And a topic came up and you just said something off the cuff. Oh yeah, they're traitors and angels. I was like, what is that? We were talking about coping, how human beings learn to cope with difficult situations.
Right.
So I wanted to bring you in. But before we dive into coping strategies and traitors and angels. Why don't you just tell us a little bit about what do you want people to know about you and what you're bringing today?
Well, I've always had a vision of a different world than we happen to live in. So I think I've been some combination of a dreamer and a doer. Which is that I have a vision about what I'd like to see, which is more, loving, caring, open communication, connectedness, care, kindness, compassion. And I'm very aware that there's, shall we say, a delta between the way the world tends to be and the way I'd like it to be. So there's the idealism and the realism, of it. And so I really like to kind of breathe into how to kind of make things better. Like you and I, Boysen, met kind of in a professional context when, as president of Division 51 and U.S. Communications Director, we connected and we've developed a friendship, since then. And I'll tell all your listeners out there, I love Boysen. Boysen is awesome.
Thank you.
Deep in my heart, and so I think that really that's what brings me alive is love, really at the core, of it. And I'm always working with those parts of me that are not exactly given to love, which actually connects with the theme we're going to be talking about, today, because it really is about complexity. And I find it kind of interesting, if I may just jump a little bit here, Boysen.
Yeah.
I find it really kind of interesting, some of these depictions of men, out in the world, like men are these simple beings, like they have these depictions of the male brain, which like one little part of it is like sex, or maybe it's a big part of it, sex, and then there's sports, and then there's beer, like that's all men think about, or kind of like redneck, humor, like men don't think about anything. Women are complex, men are simple. And that is just so not true.
Mm.
And so I'm really a believer in complexity. In fact, I'm working on a book with my buddy Fred Rabinowitz, who is a researcher in men's psychology and then a past president of my division and a amazing human being himself. We're really looking at the territory of male complexity. And really looking at different internal aspects. I mean, I know that in MKP, which has some archetypal inspirations there, that those like archetypal aspects, which comes from Jungian psychology, or part of the work that happens in MKP, and there's even, I think, greater complexity to archetypes and how they show up in individual human beings. So I know that we're going to talk a little bit about this territory, because I think that the more that we understand about complexity and start to see ourselves differently and start to actually look at ourselves versus from ourselves. And I'll just give you an example of, for me, what's been super freeing. I grew up with a father who was a major rager, and shockingly enough, I'm being facetious here, I internalized some of that rage. At least he died when I was 10, so that's a whole other matter that brought me into men's work many decades ago. But what I found was that because I was aware of my anger and I would act it out on people quite liberally, I might add, when I was younger, I would feel terrible shame, from getting in squats, to squabbles and fights and arguments and conflicts and etc. And I would like say to myself, like, I'm bad, and I'm an angry person. Like that's my identity. And that's where the problems begin. So when you identify with something that's limiting, Chris, and I come to see really that there's a part of me that's angry or hostile. And I'm quite aware of it. And I'm pretty good at not acting it out. I kind of see it before I act it out for quite some time now. And at the same time, part of that freedom has come from being able to look at that and go, hey, there's a part of me that's angry, but there's a big part of me that's loving and caring and all kinds of different things. And so when that part of me that's angry, hostile, gets activated, for the most part, fairly quickly, I can kind of step back from that and see that part and look at that part and begin to have some more compassion and kindness for that part, and being able to kind of beam, as I would say, more sun energy than wind energy, on there to kind of like settle down kind of the threat defense system, which is what gets activated when we get pissed off, right?
You have to slow down the threat defense system that gets activated when we get pissed off. Archetypes, perspective, subjective, objective, being able to look at ourselves rather than inhabiting an identity. And then we got identification and over-identification with
Are you suggesting I send a glossary or something?
Particular aspects. I'm just kind of like reviewing. So listeners out there, so do you, like me, sometimes tend to over-identify with a particular aspect of your personality or how you show up in the world? Yeah, hell yeah, I do. Do you, like me, look for ways of kind of metaphorically interacting with, relating to different parts of yourself? So in the Mankind Project, as Daniel said, we talk about archetypes a lot. And that's where this kind of Traitors and Angels came up, is in that diving into, let's complexify archetypes even further than we're used to. We've got, the kind of big scope of things. Yeah, really cool. You said a lot in that. And I also want to recognize something that you and I have talked about before, in that not over-identifying with stuff is you also describe yourself as you play in shadow. You do shadow play. So you have an ability to recognize those parts of yourself and then kind of say, oh, here's that part. I'm going to play with that part for a little bit.
Well, if you think about play, play is to some degree the opposite of the threat defense system. Like play, I don't believe gets enough play, in general. And play is a major way that we connect. And you can see actually with guys, not to trip off too much on another tributary, but you see a lot of times with guys where they're playing, they're messing around, and kind of joking. Sometimes it's joking, kind of little jousting, kind of like male mammals out there. And then someone does something that triggers the other, they react, and all of a sudden that play turns into something that feels threatening.
Yes.
This is a common dynamic, with men. And I think that the intent to connect gets subverted by the kind of threat that somehow the kind of organism, shall we say, experiences in relation to that. And it has to do with, to some degree, reading intention, right? Because as human animals, or humanimals, as I like to call us, we're always reading intention, friend or foe. It's the first order of business. It's a survival, thing. And mistaking a foe for a friend can be a real problem. Now, I don't mean to say that's just necessarily binary, because we can be friendly and foe-like, from moment to moment, even in close relationships. So, that losing balance and disconnecting is just a part of relationship, and it's part of what makes it so painful when we do disconnect, and we're actually quite attached, in the process. You look like you want to say something, Boysen.
I'm just right with you. And now I'm kind of broadening back to the study of men and masculinities and what we learn. You were telling the story about how play can very quickly turn into conflict. And I reflect that, so I was taught to put on an artifice, to put on a persona.
Sure.
And then I go around in the world and I bump into things with my persona. And I want you, man, or you, woman, you person, I want you to believe in my persona.
Right.
And so on some level, what we're talking about is, can I step back far enough from that persona, get away from that persona enough to let some light in between the mask and the actual human being that's underneath. You and I also like to play in Zen, and I'm thinking of the Zen masters that I've known in my life who have approached me. Junpo. I'm just remembering Junpo. Junpo passed away 2 years ago. Who just walk up to me or any person and look you in the eye and just know. Just look right past the persona. Look right, and he would just giggle. He would just look you in the eye and look me. I'll own it. He would look me in the eye and he would smile and say, "Yeah, okay. I see past all the bullshit. Hello. You want to come out? Or you want to stay hidden back there?"
And it's a lovely story, and I think I would characterize it differently than saying looking past all the bullshit. And because there's something in that is judgmental, obviously, and potentially pointing to like you being flawed, not necessarily you, Boysen, in particular, but just there's something shaming about that. Oh, you're full of shit. You're like some of this old, almost like attack therapy which actually was called that, many decades ago. And I just see things differently, increasingly over time. That I just am not interested in the judgments. They're easy, to have happen, but when you really think about it, that it comes from a very innocent place when we develop defenses against threats. Because if you look at life as having two primary areas, one is enhancement, thriving, connecting, loving, the good stuff, creating, innovating. And then the other part of life is protection. Mm-hmm. Have to protect yourself against actual threats. One of the big challenges is that we oftentimes misperceive an actual threat for something that we've imagined as a threat, which is either a design flaw or a bug in the system, so to speak. But we develop, defenses for, very legitimate, understandable, reasons. And I think that the degree to which we can kind of step back and go like, hey, like for me, being growing up Jewish in New Jersey, I developed a lot of sarcasm. Now, why did I develop a lot of sarcasm? Well, because my father was, my whole environment, it was very sarcastic there. Northeast, that's survival there. Mm-hmm. And so I wound up judging my sarcasm because when I moved to California, many decades ago, it wasn't, shall we say, particularly appreciated. They just didn't seem to see the humor that I did in poking fun at other people. Now, obviously, I'm being facetious that I can understand why they didn't, at this particular point. But I came to judge myself a lot for being sarcastic. But over the years, as I've come to kind of understand the brain and evolution and just how people, orient themselves in life, I've come to take things less personally. It just happened to be that the Daniel Ellenberg system was born into this particular family at this particular time in this particular context. In Buddhism, there's the term dependent origination, which is basically that everything is connected in the wheel of life. And so it just happened to be that this being, as Heidegger, the German existentialist, said, was thrown into the world. He was thrown in, and so I found myself here. And so in order to survive, hopefully thrive, I have to take on a certain persona, that fits into the tribe, so that I can be a valued member and not get tossed out. And so the threat of social exclusion, is a very significant one for human beings. So we wind up conforming. I think one of the great ironies about male psychology is that kind of like, to some degree, some of the traditional masculinity, I'm a strong individual. I don't need anyone else. Right. I am independent. And but when you look at them, they're totally conformist. Like you're fitting in, to a particular mold because that's how your brain learned that you could maximize your chances of surviving and hopefully thriving. But as they say, no man is an island. I think part of the work, with MKP and other, like the men's groups I've led for decades right now, and some of the great work that's going on in, kind of evolving male consciousness, is basically kind of letting that stuff down and going, hey, dude, you know, you're unique, just like everyone else. Just like you're, yeah, you're special. Yes, right. I mean, overcoming specialitis, seems to be a very important evolutionary step in life.
And paradox, right? And the paradox of it is that, yes, you are absolutely 100% beautiful and perfect and special and unique. And me too. And we together.
Exactly. And to appreciate that. I mean, if you want to really talk about diversity and inclusion and equity, I mean, that there's no cookie cutter way to be a man. Like, I know that, like, my work, I call Strength with Heart. And I work with a number of other guys in really developing a kind of community around Strength with Heart. And I really strongly believe that there's no right way to, to embody being a strong, heartful man. Like, there's some guys who are just born like they're more like football player types, and they may come across as maybe a little more macho, and that's just kind of their wiring there. And of course, the culture contributes or doesn't contribute to that. And there are other people who, like a friend of mine was saying, his son is a musician. He's not like that kind of like what you look at, masculine kind of thing, but he is strong and heartful, in his manifestation. And I think that the more that we can actually go, like, what's ornate, innate, maybe ornate also, but what's
that too. Yes. Mm-hmm.
That's right. Very. So what's innate within an individual, i.e., either temperament, and then how to kind of bring themselves out, and manifest, who they are in essence. And there's a saying that's attributed to Paul the Apostle. It's the only one I know, and I don't even know if it's true, but it's kind of interesting, which he said, supposedly, you should check Snopes on this, that if you bring forth what is within you, what you bring forth will save you. If you do not bring forth what is within you, what you do not bring forth will destroy you. Right? And in some ways it fits with James Hillman's ideas about the daemon, which is that, or the acorn principle, that we're all born, with a particular nature. And it's our job, so to speak, to allow that nature to emerge. And so part of there's actually in the Talmud, there's a belief that in the womb, the being knows the secrets of the universe, and then upon birth forgets everything. And so the process of life is to remember that. And in some ways it kind of fits with the whole idea of education, which not the way education is generally taught, which is kind of to put in from without, feed people information, inform.
The empty vessel, right?
But the etymology of the word from the Latin educere, it means to draw out from within. Right? And so just imagining that the work of becoming educated, is to allow and to bring forth that which is within. It kind of reminds me of the Mark Twain line: "Don't let your schooling get in the way of your education."
We've gone from Paul the Apostle to James Hillman to Mark Twain in the course of 5 minutes, less than 5 minutes. Which is why I enjoy talking to Daniel.
Thank you. It's my loose associations.
It is. It's kind of that. So going back to we were playing with the Daniel Ellenberg system being thrown into the world. And those were words that you used that I was just like, wow, imagine myself as a system.
Right.
That has developed particular aptitudes based on the environment that it grew up in.
Right.
that I take on as artifice and then expect everybody to accept this artifice as what is me. And I probably buy into the beliefs about what I am. And maybe there's more to the system.
I'm pretty confident there is.
Yeah. Then what's there?
I mean, the paradox is that it's also very personal. I mean, as I'll say to my clients at times, I know it feels so personal because you're you. It couldn't be more personal, right? And I get that for sure. And also, part of the paradox is that it's not personal. And the more that you can really get that your causes, conditions, and choices that led you to be who you are, plus you throw a little bit of your nature temperament in there. And so, sure, you're special, you're great, but on some level, that the ego that is part of having a body is also a challenge for transformation. And so we're born with a certain kind of wiring that can lead us into all kinds of different directions, right? But on some level, what do you want to be developing into? And to some degree, that has to do with listening. Listening to what wants to come out. I mean, I know for me that I really tried to be this great presenter, and I was going to be the strong guy. And even if I was talking about vulnerability, I wasn't necessarily going to show any, in talking about it. And over the years, as I've gotten older, I've kind of like, oh God, give me a break. I'm trying too hard. I'm trying to impress. I'm trying to prove something. And at a certain point, I just started to kind of lose interest, shall we say. A funny way of putting it, and in proving something, and I started putting much more of my energy into connecting, because that's where the juice is. It's our relationships with each other. You want to say something? I can tell.
Losing interest in staring at my own navel, right? Losing interest in navel gazing and gaining interest, gaining interest in this connection, gaining interest in others, gaining interest in, oh my gosh, how can I see more of who you are? Right. How can I see more of who I am?
Yes.
It's wonderful.
It's so much more fun.
Discovering those new parts of myself, right? And at first I take them very, very seriously and oh no, that's I want to protect it, I want to hold on to it, and eventually it gets to a place where it's just like, oh gosh, look at that. Isn't that cute? Look at that. Isn't that cute?
Ooh, we want to squeeze your little cheek now.
Right. Yes, that's so fun. So we got to at least, we got to get to our traitors and angels and coping strategies. So we were talking about adaptivity, and we were talking about resilience. You and I talk about resilience a lot in our conversations. So bring us into this idea of traitors and angels.
Right. So it's not angels and demons like in the Dan Brown book. So the theme of angels and traitors came from a guy named Eugene Sagan, who was actually a first cousin of Carl Sagan.
Oh, cool.
I did not know Eugene Sagan. My wife trained with him, and he never wrote. And so there's no books, there's no articles, there's nothing out there in the written world about angels and traitors. But I find it a super useful system. I'm a systems guy. I like to learn different systems and start to kind of integrate those and kind of see the world through the lens of what makes sense to me. And this particular system makes a lot of sense, which is basically that we all develop a multitude of different aspects of ourselves, as we were talking about in terms of complexity. Now, some of those aspects you might say are kind of pro-thriving. And the other aspects you might say are pro-surviving. And so the pro-thriving would be called angel aspects. Now, we're not talking about little characters with wings. You might call them allies, or inner allies. So these are all self aspects. They all exist within individuals. And so the pro-thriving or angel aspects are really geared toward our expansion, our fulfillment, our connection. And so it may be something of like an angel character, may be like an inner coach who says, you know what, you can do it. Dude, you have it. You have everything you need right now. You can step up. You deserve this. You can create. It's very encouraging. And there it might be like, hey, you can eat well and or exercise. It's trying to help you create a thriving life, and it's just a direct channel into it, right? And the traitor aspects, or what might be called dysfunctional angels, are trying to keep you safe. So they have a positive purpose, but they have a negative method. So, for example, the self-critic is a classic traitor character. And some people go like, keeping me safe? Huh? What are you talking about? I hate my self-critic. And they desperately want to get rid of their self-critic because they see it as hostile, malevolent toward them. And indeed, it can manifest that way for sure. It's not like the loving the experience of an internal character saying, you can't do anything right, you're such a loser, what the hell's wrong with you, like that. And obviously, people have different manifestations of a self-critic. There aren't too many people who don't have that character, but they can show up very differently in other people. So, but when we kind of step back and we look at like, well, what on earth could be positive about that? Well, it turns out that if you have a voice in there, so for example, your father said, "Hey, you're a loser. You can't do anything right. Don't bother. You're hopeless. And you internalize that voice. It's kind of like the voice comes in like through the permeable membranes. Our brain takes resonance, becomes an internal character. That there's a threat for actually stepping out, so to speak. So if you were, for example, to feel like, oh, I'm creative. I want to, start playing guitar. I want to perform my guitar. So, oh, come on, give me a break. You can't. And so you can't do it. People are going to laugh at you. They're going to lose you. So that critic is basically trying to keep you safe from humiliation or some other threat or even potentially physical violence. So if you listen to it, you actually smallify yourself, but it actually feels like a protection. It comes out as a self-protection, right?
Yes.
And so it's there it is. It's trying to keep you safe, but its method keeps you stuck.
Where in your life are you standing at a crossroads? What is the resistance that's holding you back? There is a circle of brothers waiting to meet you and stand with you in facing your next step. That is what the online Crossroads course from the Mankind Project USA is about. Facing your resistance and stepping into your brilliance. See the show notes for details.
And so the idea is not to get rid of them, because I think a lot of times people don't like parts of themselves and their natural impulse is to try to get rid of that.
Right.
But it doesn't work that way. The rules of the outer world where you can get rid of things are very different from the rules of the inner world.
I would argue that you can't get rid of things in the outside world either. They're over there.
Right. Well, you have a larger waste can to throw things into,
Right?
Then shall we say, or at least you don't like that car and you sell it.
Sell it.
You don't like that relationship and you leave it. So you can get it out, at least out of your proximity. Now, if you're super attached, you're still that attachment is an internal experience,
Right.
to that. But internally, if you don't like your anxiety, try to get rid of your anxiety. It doesn't work that way. It actually exacerbates it, ironically. And indeed, there's a whole body of work called ironic processes, which is based on how the mind works. And this guy, Daniel Wegner, I think he wrote a book called Don't Think of White Elephants, I think, something like that. But the basic idea is that we have an operating system in the mind, like our internal operating system that is geared toward fulfilling the operations that we have set out. So if you have a positive target, like I want to create a greater job or a relationship. Start thinking about, oh, how can you do that, right? And it's expanding it. So it's actually, the operation is geared towards something you actually want in your life. But it's very different when the operation is something you don't want in your life, right? And so if it's like, I don't want anxiety, the operating system is like, okay, let's get rid of anxiety. And then it activates what's called the monitoring system.
And all it's focusing on is the anxiety.
Exactly. And that's the irony, and so it's the monitoring system is monitoring the degree to which you're successfully fulfilling the operation of getting rid of anxiety, and hence keeps focusing, keeps seeing anxiety, right? And so it exacerbates it, ironically, and so that's why the power of just kind of being with and just embracing and accepting, okay, I'm feeling anxious right now, and just breathing into and being with the anxiety and not trying to change it. But you can't strategize. If you strategize like, I am going to accept my anxiety so that I will get rid of it, it doesn't work that way, because, it's like, he knows when you've been good. He knows when, it's like, you're inside, you can't fool yourself like that.
Right. And what I heard in what you said, and tell me if this is on track, that it becomes less about I'm trying to get rid of my anxiety and more about I am becoming a confident person. I am becoming skilled in something else. Like, it's a total refocus on something else to monitor. I'm becoming better at art. Yes.
Right. And in attempting and focusing on what you're trying to actually move into, you're willing to deal with what can get in the way. So for example, like for you, Boysen, I have a high degree of confidence based on actual experience that there are certain aspects of your work that are challenging. I'm not going to go into any specifics, but it probably has something to do with dealing with human beings, which seems to be part of the challenge that we all face in life, right?
Yes.
At the same time, you have a vision of what you want to do as the communications director of MKP. And so consequently, you have to deal with things that are difficult, that are, painful in ways, so that you can fulfill your vision or mission, as. And I think that in life, that's just the reality. You want to, deal with, climate change. Well, you got to deal with some pain because you're confronting difficulties and people and institutions that are not, on board. You want to create a startup. Well, they're going to be challenges, and so you have to be able to metabolize the difficulties or challenges in the service of fulfilling the mission.
Beautiful. So I'm going to do my personal work here. Other thing that we get in MKP that many of our listeners will know about is we do mission statements, right? So out of the work that we do, we put together mission statements. And so my mission is I transform culture by designing change, building bridges, and co-creating space for connection.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So, and I'm just going along with this pro-surviving, the traitor character. So something that I notice about myself and struggle with in living my mission is that, especially in the last 18 months, the last 2 years, the last 4 years, 6 years, the world's divided, the world's divided, the world's divided, the world's divided. I want to stop the world from being divided. I want to end the division. I want to end the division. And
sure,
I end up getting in that, which is pro-survival. It is a very pro-survival mindset. I'm trying to survive and I'm trying to attack division. What does attacking division do? Right? So
kind of like mitosis.
Yeah. Mitosis. So when I am in kind of a more angel mindset, then it's not that. It's I'm building the bridge. I'm building a bridge. I'm building a bridge. I'm building a bridge.
Beautiful.
So that's That's my work. So, and I notice there, and I'm going to jump into sarcasm too. I'm upstate New York. Upstate New York sarcasm, slightly different than
It's better. I'm sure it's
than
better.
New York. It's probably a little dirtier, and there's more cows involved in upstate New York sarcasm. But what about all those other jerks out there who I have to deal with on a day-to-day basis, or you know, listeners? Hey, you know, people in your life who are, I judge, acting from traitor characters rather than from angel characters.
What about them?
What am I supposed to do with that? How do I fix this?
Is that your job?
Is that my job? No, it's not my.
I see the source of your pain. You think you have some level of control, or you would really love to, and which I understand, of course. But
Yeah,
you know, all those control stuff, they're doomed to create massive suffering.
right. And I'm playing with this, and I'll own it. Yeah, I do. I absolutely do want to control things. I absolutely do want to fix things. I absolutely do want to, you know,
Totally.
have influence, and in my worst days, I want to brute force it
Yep.
into changing. Right. And there it is. Is that your job? So here's the first question to ask yourself, listener. Is that your job? To fix somebody else? And then, yeah, do you have control?
I mean,
See, the angels, the bells rang, the angels came in.
there we go. It's totally natural and understandable, and I certainly get it. And I want to change the world. As I started off, you know, by saying I want a different world, and certainly for the best thing to do if you have that capacity is just turn the switch. But it turns out that there isn't that switch, you know, and so we have to find other ways to create our sense of peace in life. And you know, I think about, you know, on one level, for me, I guess, how can I be in as equanimous a state as possible, and which is part of why I practice meditation. I don't know if I'm naturally geared towards like being a super chill, you know, person. But I aspire to it being more chill, you know, over the time, and part of it really has to do with just like letting go of trying to control other people, and by the way, I don't in any way say I have even close to mastery of this, but it is still a way I'm trying to focus. So, for example, Vladimir Putin. Now, I can't think of a more awful human being who has kind of power to destroy, and it's so painful and super triggers my hate, and I just see his face and I want to strangle him, and I rip, you know, it's just like, and at the same time I realize that hatred is spawned by care, concern, compassion, because I feel so bad, you know, for the Ukrainian people and the Russian people and just the planet right now. Unnecessary and evil incursion, you know, there. And then I'm all worked up watching my TV, and God, am I being effective, right? Right. I'm doing such good work by yelling at the TV says so beautiful, right? No, it's not. You know, and so I try to, you know, I work on stepping back and going, okay, accepting, like, this is this planet. You know, there are many things on this planet that I find disgusting, frankly. There are many things I find beautiful and lovely and inspiring, but there are certainly those I feel contemptuous toward, disgusted by, and certainly violence is one of them. You know, and mass violence is like just the lack of care. It's unbelievable to me.
Right.
You know, and I'm not in charge. And I go, it'd be much better if I were in charge of Russia, or if you were like, it would be better if just about anyone. Sorry, it would be much better if there were anyone, you know, who were in charge of Russia than this guy. sorry. Um, that was called not turning your phone off before a podcast.
That happens to the best of us
Yes,
frequently.
it may happen to the worst of us also, but to kind of keep stepping back and going, what can I control, and
Right.
where can I have the greatest influence? And it turns out that for each of us, the place that we have the greatest influence is in our minds, in our minds. And so that's why the power of practice, is so important. And also just accepting reality. Like, we live on a planet where there's, there's violence, there's love, there's violence. In Buddhism, they say this is the perfect place to awaken because it is a combination of both the heaven realms and the hell realms. And so it's a great place to work on hatred. In Buddhism, they have the deadly triad: greed, delusion, and hatred. And so greed, trying to get more, acquire, being attached. I gotta have this, I gotta have that, I gotta, and getting all bent out of shape and not getting it. Delusion, not seeing the world the way it is. Oh, yes, it's all beautiful, isn't it? You can trust everyone. No. But if you turn into I can't trust anyone, that's a different matter, right? So you're trying to find the middle path of being aware, being awake, and being as loving as you can, while at the same time not being stupid. Not doing stupid stuff and winning a Darwin Award. It's just acting out and in greed, delusion, or hatred. It ain't simple, this being human. I thought have a book called Being Human, Not for the Faint of Heart.
Right. So bringing it back around to the idea of traitors, dysfunctional angels, that yelling at my TV, there's some part of that feels safer than opening myself to the depth of care.
Right.
That's actually underneath.
That's right.
That anger.
That's right. And thank you. And I should feel more emotional you saying that, Boysen, because that's right. The other night, I actually cried for the first and only time about Ukraine and what's going on, because I was in anger, and I did ask myself, like, what's going on here? I just could just feel the grief of just and the helplessness. It's like, oh God,
yeah,
witnessing this and just it's so disempowering, and just to feel that's the reality.
So what do you, that was beautifully stated, and you've said a couple of things already, but what do we say to others who are listening to this about, here's a couple of things that Daniel Ellenberg is doing to kind of bring more of the helpful angels and less of the dysfunctional angels and traitors into your awareness?
Well, and so okay, I'll go with what I think the question is. I think sitting with, so if they're sitting with whatever those aspects are, and so if it's a critic, breathing in and just allowing that to be here, and then also going like, I notice, there's a part of me that's very self-critical. That one practice, I notice there's a part of me, or I'm aware of an aspect of myself, is a way of practicing disidentification. And indeed, in studies putting people in fMRIs, functional magnetic resonance imaging machines, which are basically taking videos, of different areas of the body. In this case, it was taking videos of the brain. When people practice that disidentification practice, they could literally see in the brain that when the activation in the limbic system, where there's emotional hijacking, that it would actually get calm through the calming kind of rains of GABA, and putting out, so to speak, the cortisol, the hot fires of cortisol, which is a major stress hormone. Right? And so that practice itself has been shown to, shall we say, untrigger people,
Mm-hmm.
to be able to kind of step back. Because in life, there's kind of this strange dynamic paradox. There's many paradoxes in life, and one of them is feeling something deeply and being with it. And if it's the anxiety, which I've had a lot of, in my life, in my meditation practice, I just sat with anxiety, and I really practiced like it's okay, because there's a part of me that wants to get rid of that, and just sit with it and let go of control, because we not only can't control the world, we can't even control ourselves,
Mm.
right? And so to be able to surrender, which is not giving up, surrender is different. Surrender is an action, and with surrender to that and allow that to be, there's a way that it starts to shift. So I think the practice of just acceptance, and to accept means just to take as is, not adding a lot of embellishment to it. That's it. Okay, there's anxiety here. Oh, there's anger here. There's in part of meditation is even noting planning, noting anger coming up. Oh, I'm noticing there's a part of me that's feeling scared right now. Oh, okay. Okay. Don't need to change it.
Beautiful. Something that I notice in your language that I just reflect back for myself is part of the disidentification, or part of taking this kind of objectivity around our emotional states, is also like, I'm mad, I'm angry, versus I have anger. Oh, there's anger. In a
Right.
lot of Zen circles, they talk about it as arising.
Right.
Oh,
Exactly.
there's anger arising.
Exactly.
And then the anger recedes. Oh, there's
Yeah.
sadness arising, and the sadness recedes.
Right.
All grounded in caring. Like it seems to me like the human being, we've survived because we care.
Right. Right. Exactly. It really tracks back to even what Darwin was saying about survival. It's not the whole
Right.
idea of survival
Good.
of the fittest. The way it was interpreted for so long is like the strongest, but that's not what he meant by that. He actually meant the ones that are most adaptable to change. And so resilience, you mentioned that earlier, is really based on flexibility and adaptability. And it's like if you brazenly push against the nature of things, the nature of things will turn around and crush you. But if you kind of go with, as they say, the watercourse way, if you go with the water rather than against it, you're in a much better place to stay afloat. And fighting life, reality always wins. It always wins.
Good. And so that's kind of that's an internal look at, oh, I'm noticing, oh, I see, oh, there is that kind of perspective taking, and I'm now applying that to other people. So not only do I have all this stuff in myself, but I also tend to project it all over the world, and I want to control other people's responses and reactions and emotions.
What are you saying, Boysen, that you project?
Well, I don't personally. Others that I know.
There's a part of you.
Right. Right. There's a part of me. No,
Right.
but it's the same kind of thing, right? Like when I am at my healthiest in being a parent of teenagers, I can notice what is happening with them,
Right.
rather than identifying them with whatever behavior, rather than railroading them into you are the behavior that you're doing right now, instead of right now, this is the behavior that's showing up. 5 minutes from now, the behavior is going to be different.
Well, even thinking about the word emotion, thinking about the word emotion as like energy in motion. So those emotions are fluid, right? Emotions are very different from moods. Moods, Moods they kind of descend, and there's no like necessary way out until you just really have to work harder with moods and emotions in ways. And with your kids, they're just going through their thing, and to the degree that you can really work with yourself so that you're not reacting, more responding, the better. But obviously that's no simple matter, and children are, it seems like they're almost wired to push your buttons, in a certain way. They're so good at it. Like, eat your food now. We have to go. No, I want to play with my food. No, I'm not listening to you.
It's yeah, reaction and response, right? And then yes, I react to my kids sometimes, and I respond to my kids sometimes, and my responses to my kids are a whole lot quieter, I'll just say that, and a whole lot more curious,
Right.
a whole lot more validating.
Well, you're balanced then. You're in a balanced state. When you're reacting, you're in an unbalanced state. And a lot of life is about gaining and losing balance. There's no steady state.
Yes. And then the internal responding and reacting. I can respond some when I'm healthy, when I am pro-thriving, I'm responding to what emotions are arising within me, or responding to the circumstances that are arising in my head. When I am not so pro-thriving, when I'm survival, anxiety is arising, and then I go to I'm anxious, then I go to I'm going to expend more energy and more cortisol to try and slam down this anxiety. And that's that reactive cycle, right? I'm going to force more energy into it, and it just increases the amount of heat.
Right. On some level, if you there's another set of practices I find useful in terms of working, with these characters. So we talked about some about noticing and being with, and then, and stepping back from them. There's also a way of kind of animating them. And so, for example,
good.
It might be, you may think like, there's a part of me that's just really weird. God, I don't want this weird part to come out. And trying to stuff the weird part down, like keep it in the closet, push it back, lock the door, put, chairs up against it, maybe find an anvil. I'm not going to let that out. But it tends to get louder, right?
Yes.
But again, these aspects, when we try to push them down, they don't like that. It's kind of like putting a little kid down, and they're going to try and get out on some level. And so think about giving it a form. So I warn your listening audience here that it's going to sound a little bit weird. I'm not sure exactly what I'm going to do, but something's going to come out. I'm pretty confident about that. So, okay, so I'm going to say, like, there's a part of me that's really scared. It's like a little scared kid. And so I'm going to just give it a voice, like let it come into my body. I don't know what to do. I'm so lost. Please tell me what to do. I keep on and on, with this, and just give it energy and let it express itself. Now, obviously, you don't want to do this in a crowded room,
Right.
but just give it a form. I'll tell you, many years ago, when I was giving a presentation to a professional audience, I was a lot younger and, shall we say, a bit more insecure about my professional persona there.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to this, I live in Marin County, above San Francisco. I was driving to this presentation. I was just super anxious. I was like, I could barely breathe. And I asked myself, like, what the hell? What am I so scared of? I'm scared that they're going to see me as a complete phony, BS, imposter, weird, crazy person that are like just how you want to be seen during a presentation, right?
Right. And
so I said, like, give it a form. And so I'm driving. I had my eyes open. I said, and I brought it out really intensely for a few minutes. And by the time I was through, I felt super relaxed. You know, it's just like I gave it a voice, I expressed it, let the energy out. It's the same kind of principle in a certain way. It's like if you take a hand and you start tightening your fist, and you can do this, Boysen, and anyone in the listening audience, and then tightening your forearm and your bicep and your shoulder, and just keep going down, making your whole body tighter, 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 everywhere you can, as tight as you possibly can, tight, 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 until you can't take it anymore. It's so tight, and you did finally just let go. Just let it all go. Do you feel more relaxed?
Mm-hmm.
It's the principle of opposites, right? That when you give energy to the opposite of something, it will lead into that opposite. You know, so increasing the tension leads to relaxation, but you have to do it consciously. And so the whole idea of like letting out this weird particular character, when you let it out, all of a sudden, oh, it's got a form. It's manifest. It's welcomed. And when we welcome these different aspects, they integrate. And so the idea of evolution, one's personal evolution, is to continually integrate, you know, these different characters into the complexity of who you are.
Great. Nice. Thank you. And circling back around to MKP, I learned how to do this in men's groups. Right?
Yes.
So that personal, I can do this in a room by myself, and sometimes I'm good at that, and sometimes it's very difficult. And I learned over 17 years that it might sound really, really scary to think about doing that with others or in a group of people, but it's actually the most intensely liberating thing I've ever experienced.
There you go.
To have the space to just have a safe, kind of ritualized, sacred, meaning boundaried, set off environment in which to give voice and embody all of those kind of energies and then let them go.
Right. And the beauty of doing it in community, you know, there, because you know, it's like, oh, at two brute, oh no, not brute, but oh, and you have that aspect. I thought I was the only one, you know, and it's you kind of the illusion of, again, uniqueness, even if it's bad, you know, you think it's shameful, like you think you're the only one who has that, but it's like that's not the case, you know, and to be embraced and loved. Like bring out your weirdness, and it's like, oh wow, like that's part of the complexity of who you are. Cool, that's great. You're welcome. So you're like welcoming that aspect of yourself out, you know, is the internal experience, and then having that aspect welcomed in the community of other men is incredibly rewarding. So I think that's awesome and a very important point you raised. And I've seen it myself in men's groups and in the men's groups that I lead.
Yes. So find that, listeners, you know, find that community for yourself. Where you have the freedom to do that. Beautiful. Any hint? I've got one for grief, and I want to know if you've got one for grief. Do you have a practice for grief?
I don't know that I have a specific practice, you know, for grief, with the exception of, I don't know if I call it a practice exactly, but it's a mindset around grief, you know, which is to embrace it. You know, it's like the antidote to big boys don't cry, you know, is to recognize that there's something soulful in the moisture of grief, and that it is that moisture that kind of fertilizes the ground from which new growth can occur. And I think a lot of times when the ground is dry, you know, and a person can learn like that's weak somehow, to grieve and to show some kind of vulnerability, that they tighten and armor, personify, you know,
around it.
That we have to like kind of give space and recognize that it's a part of the human experience. It's not unmasculine to cry. And, you know, it's kind of craziness because there are traditional aspects of masculinity where men would cry. in different cultures at different times. It's not like like masculinity has only been enacted in one particular way throughout human history in every different culture. It's not like that. So it's like, how do we be the best we can be?
Thank you. Well said. Coming down, wrapping up. Daniel, I really enjoy my time with you. So we've been talking about aspects, the angels and traitors. We've talked about perspective taking. We've talked about reactivity. Is there any piece of wisdom from another famous person in history that you'd like to close us with?
For some reason, I'm thinking about R.D. Laing. I'm not even sure if this is exactly relevant here, but I find it super useful in terms of looking at self or selves awareness. And R.D. Laing was a Scottish psychiatrist who did a lot of work with schizophrenics many moons ago. I won't go into a whole biography of him, but he had a way of kind of languaging things, I think, in a fascinating way. And one of his amazing quotes was, he said, "The range of what we think and do is limited by what we fail to notice. And because we fail to notice that we fail to notice, there's nothing we can do to change until we notice how failing to notice shapes our thoughts and deeds." Would you please repeat that, Boysen? Good luck on that, right? It took me a while to remember it.
That's a really good repetition. Yeah, that's beautiful. And the not noticing that I don't know what I don't know prevents me from possibility.
Right. And so even thinking about it and asking yourself, what is it that I'm not noticing? Or what am I not noticing now? And if you think about using your iOS or your MIOS, your Mail Internal Operating System there, and you ask yourself, what am I not noticing? It's like your own servo mechanism, like on a search engine. And so you're asking yourself a question. Every quest begins with a question. You're asking yourself to focus, your unconscious mind to focus on something that it wasn't focusing on, and it will pick things up. So what am I not noticing? What would be helpful for me to focus on now? And just see what comes up.
Daniel Ellenberg. Thanks, brother.
This has been another episode of the Mankind Podcast, produced in association with the Mankind Project USA. We have been your hosts, Paul Newell, Boysen Hodgson, and myself, Brandon Clift, and we want to thank our guests for joining us today and imparting their wisdom from their experiences in this amazing journey called life. If you want to find out more about today's guests and support them in their mission, you can find links to them in the show notes. Now, if you have found gold and insights that you believe could benefit your loved ones and those you care about, be sure to share it with them. And of course, we are always grateful for a rating and review of the show on iTunes. Now, we've got to give special thanks to our back-end team, producer, editor, and audio ninja for the show, Michael J. Russer, and Don Huff, who takes care of our graphics and promotions and pretty much makes us look pretty. So, of course, thank you, Don. Now, above all else, we've got to thank you, the listener, because through your attention and your support, you have made it possible for us to let men all over the world know that they are not alone and that there is more than one way to be a man. And if something in this episode has touched you, then perhaps it is the call to action to get involved in men's work. With live trainings happening constantly and in-person trainings happening all over the world, the Mankind Project definitely has something for you. Now, if you've enjoyed the music in this episode and all of our episodes, be sure to check out Jim Donovan and the Sun King Warriors. I have links to them in the show notes. And lastly, just know, what it means to me to be a man is completely different than what it means for you. What it means for Paul, what it means for Boysen, that is the beauty of this journey. So if you are looking for guidance, support, and community as you begin to unpack and dive deeper into your men's work journey, then you know where to find us. same place, same time next week. Lots of love. We'll see you then.